I'm Steve Catronio.
And I'm Ron Pardini from CIFX.com. And in this workshop, we're going to show you mask augmentation, where we take a mask such as this, and using our special effects techniques and painting techniques, we can create other creations like these.
But for this workshop, we're going to show you how to take an inexpensive store-bought mask such as this and apply the same techniques that we teach you to create works of art such as these.
What we would like to do is transform this mask into a kind of a mummified form. So we're going to be taking it and using some just typical stuff that you can find around your house, some toilet paper, maybe some rags, an old t-shirt, something like that, or some cheesecloth. All of this kind of stuff can be used to aid and make a completely unique and different form of the mask. So what I've done on this mask is I've already gone ahead and pre-cut the mask, or the lower jaw off of the mask. It's just another step that you can do. You don't have to. It's not necessary, but it does augment the mask and change the mask form up a little bit, like we were talking about before. So we're going to discard this piece, and as I said, you're going to be using toilet paper. Typically we use either a 1-ply or a nice 2-ply. You want low-grade toilet paper. You don't want it to be super cushiony and soft. The reason being is when you start to utilize the latex and really get the latex to absorb into this stuff, the more absorbent that the paper goods are and stuff, they usually have multiple layers, and those will peel away and make it more difficult to work with. So just use the low-grade, cheapest stuff that you can find. Paper towels also work good for this technique. So once again, we're going to start with our good old trusty chip brush, and we're going to grab our liquid latex, and we're going to liberally apply a nice coat all over the outside of our mask here. Okay, again, you want to coat the entire mask because this will seal in all of the paint, and this will help everything that you go to do after this bond directly on to the mask and make a nice, good, permanent bond. Okay, so what I've done here now is I have completely covered this mask with liquid latex. The purpose for doing this is that the liquid latex, when you're applying to your latex mask, they're going to have already a pre-painting coat on them, and sometimes even some sort of a sealer over the top. And some of those things may want to lift, and your augmentation may not stick directly onto that mask as well. So what we do is we give it an entire coat of latex and paint the whole thing down. You don't want to get it too much so it's drippy or running off. You also don't want the latex to be puddling like in the eye sockets or in any other detail. But what you do want to do is you do want to make sure that the whole thing has been hit and at least touched a little bit by the latex. That way the latex can seal in the entire mask and create basically a new mask right over the top of your store-bought mask. So I've hit this now using our chip brushes and our liquid latex. We've coated the entire mask. It has a nice good tap coat on here, and you might even want to let it just dry just a teeny bit before you start the process so that it has a chance to kind of firm up a little bit. And as I mentioned, we're going to be using some tissue paper and then these other wrappings to kind of create a mummy form. However, I think what we're going to start with first is a little bit of fleshy tissue, because we want our mummy to have some areas where it looks like it's kind of rotted and fleshy. So what you can do, there's two ways to do this. With the tissue paper, and since we've already wetted the area, I'm going to apply the tissue paper directly onto this. If I were using something a little bit thicker like the fabric, you're going to see that I'm going to paint it out on the surface in front of me, and that way I can coat both sides. But because the tissue paper is so thin, it will easily absorb all of this latex as we paint it on. So you want to paint it on, and when you tear the little pieces of tissue paper, you want to make nice rough little edges and stuff. You don't want a nice solid square edge. When you lay these things on here, if you have a bunch of square edges, you can sometimes see the form showing through the latex, and instead of looking like a nice natural earthy form, you end up with something that looks fabricated and with these geometric patterns on it and stuff. So basically I'm just going to add a few little chunkies of latex and tissue paper here, and then as I'm laying these guys in here, we can take the end of our chip brush or any other tool we want and gently lift some of this stuff up. We can push it around on here so that we can actually make it into almost like using a little piece of a soft clay or something. We can start to sculpt our form on here, and by doing this you can see that there's these areas in here that are the actual mask showing through again, still coated with a little bit of latex though. Those will become like little chunks of skull or something showing underneath this nasty, fleshy upper level. We can also continue to build over the top of the areas we were already at, and you can pile up several layers, make it nice and thick, and that again will give you, you know, additional layers of this fleshy tissue that you can move around and really make into some sort of a crazy rotten flesh form. Now, whatever you leave, however you leave this, when it starts to dry, it's going to dry exactly like that. So if you have little chunkies hanging off, you're going to have a little chunky on your mask. If you flatten this whole thing out, it's going to dry all flattened. So what we try to do is we try to add several different layers. You want to start with the basic form, add a layer, add another layer on top of that, and just keep adding some multiple layers till you get the thing so that it has a lot of good textures and places to cast shadow and stuff like that in there. So that really gives it that extra push over the top. I mean, when we started with this thing, it was nice and smooth. Now we're going to make it all gory and chunky. So I'm going to continue this in a couple other areas. I've started here on the forehead. I may add one down here on the cheek area a little bit, maybe over on the part of the nose, just to give it a little bit more. And again, we're going to go over the top of this whole layer. This is just our basic first layer here. Okay.
It's a good place to cut.
Sure. Okay, now that we have all of our fleshy chunks in place, you can see that I've augmented around the eye and the nose area here, and the lower eye and cheek area here, and up on the top of the skull, just still again using that tissue paper technique. Now we're going to jump over and we're going to start utilizing some of the fabric techniques. I'm going to start with the heavier of the two fabrics. I want to, again, creating these layered effects. I'm going to start with something that's a little bit denser because the lighter weight fabric will be able to flow over the top of that and make some really cool effects. So you're basically just going to take some scissors and cut little strips, and they can be, you know, you don't want to make these strips nice and perfect. You want them to be nice and jagged. Sometimes you can even take the fabric and rip it, and when you rip it, it gives these nice little rippy ends and little strings hanging out and stuff. And as I mentioned, we're going to take them, and this time, instead of just applying it directly to the mask, we're going to first permeate the fabric with a little bit of the latex. We're going to do the one side, flip it over, paint on a little on the other side. You just want to make sure it's pretty good and saturated. It doesn't have to be totally though. Some of the fabric showing through is alright too. And then we can start laying these guys over in our wrappings. And you can use a brush if you want to kind of tack it down. In fact, it's good to take a little bit of extra latex and kind of push it in a few areas just to really make sure that the fabric lays down. Although if you want some ends sticking out and stuff for added effect, you know, that's definitely okay to do. You just got to make sure that enough of the fabric tacks down with the latex that it's not going to peel off or fall off of the mask during the drying process. So we'll do several pieces of this here just to kind of give it some cool new form. Again, you know, liberal use of the latex. Although you don't want to use too much latex, because the more latex that you put on this thing, as we mentioned before, the longer it's going to take for this thing to dry. And if you get little pockets of latex in there that get trapped in between, like the first layer you put down and the outer layer, you can actually get a pocket of latex that will sit in there and remain wet and not ever dry. So let's see what we can do here. Maybe wrap some around the mouth area here. Maybe give them some sort of weird wrapping look. I'm going to leave a little of that open so we'll be able to have our own mouth showing through there underneath. Again, take a little bit of extra latex and kind of tack it on there. Okay. Check him out, see where another cool area would be. Maybe do a couple of thinner strips just to kind of add a little bit more of that detail. And with these thin strips, it's sometimes cool to make like little ends that kind of taper off and stuff, because you can wrap these guys in as though they're part of the mask here. let's see, maybe something like that. And when you tack them in, you can leave a little bit of extra stuff hanging off. Once that has all the latex in it, those will actually dry into a nice latex piece that'll be hanging off of the mask, and they'll move and stuff because they, you know, they still have a fabric base, but they will be nice and durable because of the added latex in there. So we could do a few more of those like little hangy guys, just give it some more effect. Maybe some off the other side here or something. Now you'll notice that right now I'm not really paying much attention to where my seam lines end. That's because I anticipate going back over this and covering it with another layer. But if this was going to be your final layer, you'd really want to kind of blend these edges in really good so that they don't show quite as much. I mean, obviously you want to have some sort of lines going across so that it denotes where the fabric is laying and that kind of a thing, but you don't want to have these ends that are all square, that are all meeting, because that blows the whole illusion that you're creating of this being a completely wrapped form. Okay, so there we go. We got a little bit of chunkiness going on there. And now I'm going to start in with some of this cheesecloth. And the cheesecloth is really cool because once you start ripping it, you can get these really excellent, you know, dangly string edges. You can even go in with a pair of scissors or something and just kind of tear a hole in there and kind of rip it up. Make it nice and nasty looking. And this one, again, since it's so light and since the latex will, you know, permeate this is nice and easy, we're going to just lay this on and then add the latex afterwards. So maybe do something like this. Now I'm going to take the nice clean edge and I'm going to wrap that up around whatever, you know, right nice next to the mask and try to keep that nice and tight against all of our lines here. Maybe even kind of start going over the eye here a little bit and some of the nose. You know, kind of wrapping it in, and you can stretch it, kind of pull it so it gets some nice vertical lines going in here. Then you go back with the latex and really make sure you tack all that stuff in. Now, you don't have to, again, tack all of the latex in, or all of the fabric in with the latex. You can leave some of it kind of hanging. You can go back, as we were saying with the hair technique, you can take a little bit of latex and rub it on your fingers and kind of hit some of these little dangly guys, and that'll make them kind of look a little chunky and give them a little durability. And it kind of locks everything together. So you can kind of work on this. I'm going to continue this step now and continue working around the other side, and I'll show you what it's like when we're done. Okay, so what I have here is I have a nearly finished mask. What I've done is I've created a whole bunch of different layers by taking that cheesecloth and going over the top. You can also take your tool if you get areas that you think you want to try to make have a little bit more enhanced area of detail. You can go in there with the base of your chip brush and kind of pull these areas away a little bit, and that gives it a really cool, you know, overlapping effect. Doing some of this kind of stuff where you leave the cheesecloth not really smushed into the layer below it, but actually kind of lifted above it. When we go to do the paint layer, that's going to give it all these different layers and depth, and it will really bring this thing to life. Same thing happened up here. You can see our little skull area here where we had, you know, the flesh area, then we dug away to the skull. Now I've gone through and I've pushed back all of the wrappings around here so that I create a nice little open area in the wrapping so you can see these multi-layers. And again, once we hit this with paint, it's going to make each one of those layers pop, and you're going to have this super realistic looking item. As far as the eyes go, we've gone in and I've covered up the eye a little bit, covered up the eye here a little bit, but I wanted to leave my eye sockets open because this one's going to be for one of our actors. We don't want them to be impaired or anything like that, so I'm trying to keep a nice opening. But over here you can see, you know, there is a little bit of the wrapping coming across. If you wanted to, you could wrap over the entire eye. You could do a thin layer with just a little bit of latex on it so the actor could still even see out of it. You know, whatever you want to do, there's no wrong way to do this. You just keep adding layers, change it around until you get something that you really like. I'm going to add one final detail onto this because I think it's looking pretty cool. It's got a lot of things hanging off of it, a lot of weird wrappings that are looking really rotted, and a nice little fleshy layer. But I would like to add just a teeny bit of the hair to it, like what we had talked about before. So I'm going to just bring in a little piece of hair here. And again, I'm just going to take a little teeny tiny chunk of this guy, dip it in our latex. And then I'm going to go in here, and obviously we want the hair coming from out of the fleshy layer, so I'm going to lift up my wrapping here a little bit, kind of blend the hair in, really make sure that it sticks in there, and I'm going to work the hair back into this little crevice underneath this little piece of wrapping, pull the wrapping out from underneath it, so it's kind of hanging down there a little bit. I think I'm going to do a little latex job on it here, make it really nasty so it looks like it's got some sort of stuff stuck to it, some sort of rotten dirt or whatever hanging in it. It's chunky. Maybe I'll do one more little area over here. Again, grab it by the base, dip it in latex. Make sure that the latex really encompasses all of the little ends of the hair. Maybe we can come up in this area here. Just put a little deal hanging out there. Okay, and again, I'm going to give it just a few little touches here. Get rid of some of that extra stuff. So it's just kind of nice and nasty. And I think that's it. I think that's as far as I'm going to go with him. Okay, so here we have our finished mummy transformation, where we've taken a regular mask and we've finished it off. I've completed it with a nice solid wash style paint technique. What I did basically was I started first with a dark brown wash, and I hit the entire area. Coated it all down nice and thick. Then I would take a rag and I'd pat off the high spots so it would leave all the high spots showing. I also went back, and in the area by where I wanted skull and skull-like stuff to show, I would wipe off as much paint as possible to allow the white to show through again. Then, to go back in and make it even match a little better and to make it blend into the face of the actor who's going to be wearing it, I went back and I added a little bit of a almost black color and did the same thing. I washed it into the areas where my rotten flesh would be, in around the eyes, and around the nose, you know, around both eye sockets, up here around the skull, and again, painted the black on, then immediately wiped it off, and kind of just did that dabbing technique to make it kind of have a difference. You want to have a variation. If it's all just one solid wash color, then you kind of lose some of the detail. So in this way, we have both the colors, you know, 3 actual levels of color showing through here. Now, the only other step that I would do if I wanted to finish this mask off further is you might consider doing an airbrush layer to this. And what we would do with that is we would take probably a really dark brown or maybe even a black, and we'd just airbrush lightly into all the dark spots. So any dark recess, the nasal cavity, in around the eyes, maybe in around the inner side of the, you know, where the mouth would be, that kind of a thing. You would start darkest in there, and then you'd fade out as you come out, so that it makes the darkest point possible back in the sockets and in the nasal cavity. And then to wear this, simply take and put black or eye makeup around your eyes, black makeup around your mouth, any part that's going to be exposed here, and maybe in around the nose if any of the nose is exposed. You put the mask on and your face will completely blend in, and it will disappear inside of this mask here. So anyhow, here we have the mummy, and here's how we started. Okay, now that we have completed augmenting our mask and making our mask that was an original store-bought thing into a new creation of horror, but at the same time beauty, one additional step that we can take is to take the front face mask that's only a half of a mask, and add an additional hood to the back of it. And this way you have a 2-part piece that can make what appears to be, to most people, an entire head-piece mask. This is really, really easy and extremely inexpensive as well. We start with a piece of fabric. Any kind of fabric will do. For this particular one, I've chosen kind of a lacy garment, but any sort of cotton. You want a fabric that's going to be absorbent. You don't want to use something that's like a polyester or something that's not going to absorb the latex. But any sort of partially cotton blend material will work. Also, I'm going to be using tissue paper again to give it kind of an aged look at the end. And once again, we're going to be using some liquid latex. So the way we start this, as you can see, this head bust has an additional adornment already on this. This is because the head that we're using right here is much smaller than a normal person's head. And since we're going to be making a mask that would fit some sort of random monster, or you know, we would want to fit more people in general, I've added a bunch of fabric inside of a plastic bag and taped it to the head to give it some sort of a spacer. You can also use this kind of a device, bags, plastics, saran wrap, aluminum foil, whatever, around some sort of a form to also give it some shape. Like if, for example, you wanted a hood that came off that was pointed or something like that, you could actually form that out using just whatever on top of your head form. And then you have to cover it in something that's going to release to the latex. So that's why aluminum foil or plastic or something like that should be added to the outside. So basically we're going to take our piece, and I've already pre-cut kind of a jagged little edge on here. You can make it as jagged or straight as you'd like. And I'm going to just give it a little bit of pre-latex here, just on the inside. And again, we're going to be kind of liberal with our latex, just kind of smear it around. We don't necessarily need to hit every piece of the fabric. I just want to give it something so that when I stick it on my head form, it's going to actually stay on my head form for a while so I can work with it. So we'll hit that up a little bit, and we'll take a little bit of latex and actually paint it right here on top of our head form so that again it can grab on. All right. Great. Now we take our fabric and we drape it over the top of our form here. And you're going to want to take it and play with it, make it have some wrinkles and some character. Really try to get it into the location and kind of general shape that you want first. Once you've figured out how you want your hood to look, you know, maybe have it overhang a little bit so it droops down and covers the face a little bit. That kind of, you know, hides some of the facial features and stuff like that, or you could have it pulled way back if you want to show more of the mask or whatever. Okay, you also want to check the back of it, make sure that it's going to be kind of cool on the back of the head so you don't just have this open space in the back of the head there. Okay, and then we can go back with some more latex, and you can start using the latex to hold your form here. So I'm going to start on top of the head, because that way then it will lock to the top of the head and I'm not going to have this piece falling off, hopefully. Okay, I'm just kind of doing some sporadic. Again, I'm kind of wanting, in this particular instance, our fabric texture to show through, so I'm not going to be painting the entire thing with latex. I'm just going to hit it here and there so that it will hold these wrinkles in place and stuff like that, but that it's not going to fully be just a solid latex head. Okay, then we're going to come around the front here, and again, I'm going to hit the inside of my fabric with a little latex. I'm going to find an attachment spot over here on my neck so that I can wrap this thing around and just have it hold in position there. And then I can take my other fabric from the other side and wrap it around under here too. Keep in mind you want to try to make the opening of your hood so that it's big enough that it will accommodate whatever the size of the mask that you want to have coming out of there. If not, then you're going to end up having to cut your hood to get your mask to stick through. Alright, so we'll tack that guy into place, get a little of this guy, bring him over, and then again we're letting the latex do all the work. It's going to act as our glue here and hold this guy together. Okay, so that'll give us our basic form. You can kind of sit here and play with the wrinkles again, try to get them so that they line up kind of the way you want them to be, so it gives it a little bit of extra texture. Okay, then don't forget the back of the head. You want to close this guy off as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, again, pre-latex a little area here, and then fold it over on itself so that it gives it a nice little connecting area there. Let it kind of just dry that way. Okay, now while this is all in place, now I've got my basic shape that I want. Now I want to go in and I want to make this look even nastier. Already, once this dries, you're going to have the latex in there. It's going to look really nasty. But by taking a little bit of the extra tissue technique that we learned on our masks, you can add tissue to this piece and you can give it a look so that it looks like it almost has some sort of like fleshy substance over the outside or something, really make it look rotted and fetid. So we have our wet piece here. I'm just simply applying a good liberal coat of latex to this tissue paper to get it to absorb in there. Again, once it's on here, you can use your brush or your tool or something to move it around, make wrinkles, and make some little nasty areas. And again, with the mask, or as with the mask, you don't want to leave sharp edges on anything. So anytime you're laying a couple of pieces together, if you have kind of a sharp corner or something like that, you really want to take your brush, dab it out, and then lay another piece over the top so you don't get a hard seam line there. Otherwise, once you go to the paint area, that will kind of get highlighted and that will show. So I'm going to go ahead and finish working on this, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so here we have our finished hood. As you can see, I've gone over the top of this and used our fleshy latex technique using the tissue paper. I've brought it down a little ways. I've left some areas where you can see the underlying fabric. In addition to this, you could also take it a step further. You could add leather, or you could add other types of fabric over the top if you wanted. You could do additional adornments. It's all up to you, whatever you wanted to do. You know, let your creativity run wild with this thing. But this is just the basic form. You want to make sure that once you've got the piece all the way solidified, that you pull it free all the way around from your headstand so that it doesn't bond on there really well, and it leaves the neck nice and open so that you'll be able to get a person's head through there. And again, you know, take some time to really make the wrinkles and stuff work the way you want them to. Take a look at it. If you see something you don't like, you can always now at this point mold it. You could add hair to it. There's tons of other options that you can do. But this is where we'd end right now. We'd wait for the latex to dry, and once it dries, I'll show you how to do a nice wash technique on it to paint it out and make it a finished piece. Okay, so here we have our fully completed and dried latex hood, and now I'm going to take and do a quick paint wash. I've chosen paints that match the mask that I've already created, and this again is going to be latex and water and some sort of an acrylic paint or other water-based paint. We've made it really runny so that we could do the quick wash technique. So what we're going to do is we're going to just start dabbing this on here, getting into all the little crevices and everything. We want to get in around all the little front, maybe even underneath the front end of the hood here. And we're going to go in sections at a time. Then we're going to come back and we're going to dab off with just some plain dry rags our color there. And we're going to just keep going. Don't be shy. Throw that paint on there. Just dab it in there. It doesn't matter if it gets on the black fabric either, because that'll just age it out, help it to kind of all tie in together. Okay, we want to get in here and get into all the little crevices. It's really important, especially when you have a lot of creases, that you spend the time to really get around and underneath all those creases, because otherwise you might get what's called a holiday, where it's a little area of paint or of your surface that doesn't have paint and it shows through really white. And if you get that, that kind of blows again your illusion, so that you know, it looks more like a fabricated object. So you want to really make sure that you get all of that. Again, don't let your paint dry too long on here. You want to wipe it off pretty quickly. I'm not going to wipe off too much, just enough to give it some highlights and some shadows. And you can see how the areas that have the latex in it are kind of staying kind of yellowy. Then we're getting these like little darker regions, which once this paint dries will turn really dark brown. And then we even have the black showing through of the other fabric. So we're just going to hit the whole rest of this guy here. Get them all painted out and all matching. It's up to you. If you want, you can go back over this wash once you've completed this and use other washes to give it further techniques. But for the most part, I kind of am happy usually just with the one color wash. Tie everything in to, again, to the mask that you've already will be using with this guy. Here we have our fully painted hood. Again, once this completely dries, or as it's drying, right now it's still a little bit wet, but as it dries, the color is going to darken as the latex that is right now kind of whitish will start to turn a little bit more invisible, and that'll allow our paint color to show up. If you wanted to, you could always go back over it and do an additional wash of some other color to maybe enhance it or change it up a little bit, or even airbrush it if you wanted to.
Here we have our finished creations, utilizing some very simple techniques and some very inexpensive supplies that you could get anywhere at almost any stores. They're readily available everywhere. You can use these supplies and transform masks like these into creations like these.